On my 16th birthday, the sky over Columbus, Ohio looked like it was falling apart. Rain hammered the windows so hard it sounded angry, like it had a reason. My name is Hannah Sullivan, and I remember standing in the middle of the living room holding a tiny grocery store cupcake, the kind with too much frosting and a single crooked candle. I kept telling myself that maybe this year would be different. Maybe they would surprise me. Maybe I would finally matter. My dad stood near the front door, his hand already on the knob, like he was afraid of changing his mind if he waited too long. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He just said, "You're old enough now. Get out. We're done carrying dead weight." Behind him, my stepmother smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. My 14-year-old half-sister leaned against the wall, arms folded tight, and added loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Just leave already. Don't make the house smell worse than it already does." That was it. No shouting. No explanation. No second chance. The door slammed in my face, and a second later I heard the lock click. I stood there for a moment staring at my reflection in the glass, rain blurring everything, my own face looking smaller than I remembered. Then I turned and started walking. I walked until my shoes filled with water. I walked until my legs went numb. That first night I slept on a park bench, curled into myself like I could disappear if I tried hard enough. Over the next few days, I learned which shelters stopped taking teenagers after 9, which ones needed ID I didn't have, and which security guards would look the other way if you stayed quiet. Hunger became a background noise, like traffic, always there. Weeks later, just before sunrise, I was behind a Tim Hortons digging through a dumpster, hoping to find something still wrapped. My hands were shaking from the cold when headlights cut through the rain. A black SUV rolled to a stop. I froze, already planning where I would run. A man stepped out, wearing an expensive coat that looked out of place in the alley. He didn't flinch at the smell or the mess. He just said my name. Hannah Sullivan. My heart slammed so hard I thought I might throw up. I didn't answer. I didn't move. "My name is Martin Hargrove," he said calmly. "Your great aunt passed away. She left everything to you. But there's one condition you have to accept right now." I don't know what made me get into that SUV. Maybe it was the warmth pouring out when the door opened. Maybe it was the way he said my name like it meant something. Inside, the leather seats felt unreal. The heater burned against my frozen fingers, but it couldn't touch the cold already settled in my chest. As we drove, my mind drifted backward, to where everything really started to break. My real mom died when I was 5. A car accident on I-270. One minute she was singing along to the radio, tapping the steering wheel, and the next there was a truck coming across the line. I remember the hospital hallway, the smell of disinfectant, and my dad kneeling in front of me, telling me she wasn't coming home. His hands were shaking so badly I thought he might fall over. A year later, he brought Cheryl home. She hugged me too tight, smiled too wide, and moved her things in before the sympathy cards had even stopped coming. Less than a year after that, my half-sister was born, screaming and red-faced, and from that moment on, I became the extra piece. The leftover. Cheryl never hit me. She didn't need to. She made sure I knew I didn't belong. Different rules. Different expectations. Different last name at school. My dad changed too. At first it was small. Late nights on the computer, saying he was checking sports scores. Then the overtime stopped. Bills started piling up on the counter. Phone calls during dinner that made him go quiet. By the time I was 12, collectors were calling the house. Trucks drove slowly past like they were measuring the place. Cheryl started saying money was tight because my dad still had to pay for me. My half-sister learned fast. She would whisper mistake when she passed me at school, just loud enough for her friends to hear. When my dad lost his job right after I turned 15, the house felt like it was closing in. Fights echoed through the walls. Cheryl screamed about foreclosure. My dad screamed about one last big win. I learned to stay gone as long as possible. Library until closing. Anywhere but home. Then came my 16th birthday. Cheryl texted me at school. Come straight home. We have a surprise for you. For a few stupid seconds, hope fluttered in my chest. The living room was dark when I walked in. One candle burned on a single cupcake. No balloons. No friends. Just them, standing in a half circle, and a trash bag stuffed with my clothes by the door. Cheryl spoke first, her voice sweet and sharp at the same time. We can't keep doing this. My dad wouldn't look at me. You're 16 now. You're old enough to be on your own. I stood there holding the cupcake while wax dripped onto my hand. I didn't even feel it. I grabbed the bag, walked out into the rain, and didn't look back. Now, sitting in that SUV, all of it came crashing back. The man parked at a quiet diner and slid a leather folder across the table. Inside was a photograph of an old woman with sharp blue eyes. This is Beatrice Whitford, he said. Your great aunt. She built a fortune. $52 million after taxes. She left it to you. The number didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. There's a condition, he continued. You have 72 hours to appear at her estate in Cincinnati. If you don't, everything goes to a fund for homeless youth. I stared at my cracked hands, the dirt under my nails. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to cry. I officially notified you 40 minutes ago, he said gently. We can leave now. I nodded. Because when you've had nothing, you learn to recognize the only door that's ever opened. The jet lifted through the clouds, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't cold. I opened the binder and read a handwritten letter that began, Asterisk, if you're reading this, you already know what it feels like to be thrown away. Asterisk, by the time the lights of Cincinnati appeared below, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever waited for me on the other side of this, I wasn't wasting a single minute of it. The plane touched down just as the sky over Cincinnati was turning a pale, exhausted pink, like it had stayed up all night worrying. A black Mercedes waited on the tarmac, engine running. Martin didn't say much. He just opened the door and we drove along the river while the city slowly woke up around us. 20 minutes later, iron gates opened and the car climbed a long winding drive lined with ancient trees. The house came into view like it had stepped out of another lifetime. Brick and stone, 3 stories tall, wide porches, chimneys reaching up like they were trying to touch the clouds. The Ohio River shimmered behind it, calm and steady, like it had all the patience in the world. Inside, everything smelled like lemon oil and old books. A housekeeper nodded once and vanished without a word. Martin led me up a sweeping staircase past black and white photographs of factory floors and steel workers with soot-covered faces. At the end of the hall was a heavy oak door. He punched in a code, opened it, and stepped aside. The room felt frozen in time. A hospital bed sat in the corner, machines dark and silent. A desk faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. On the desk sat a single silver laptop. Martin pressed play and left the room. The screen filled with the face of an elderly woman, thin white hair, oxygen tubes resting against her cheeks. Her eyes were bright and sharp, like nothing had ever gotten past her. Hannah, she said, her voice rough but steady. If you're watching this, you made it in time. Good. That already tells me something about you. She talked about being 17 in 1943, pregnant, thrown out by her own father. Sleeping in doorways. A newsboy who shared half a hot dog and changed her life. Welding ship plates during the war. Buying into a failing steel mill when no bank would touch her. Building everything from nothing. I looked for you, she said softly. I saw what they did to you. I saw you give your last $5 to a kid whose shoes were falling apart. That was enough. Then her voice hardened just a little. You get control of the trust, but the principal stays locked until you're 25. For 5 years, you must personally help 80 homeless or at-risk children get real housing and education. You have to be there. If you fail, every cent goes to charity. Your father and his wife get nothing. That part was intentional. The screen went black. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt awake. I accept, I said when Martin returned. He nodded once, like he already knew. Paper slid across the desk. A pen heavy in my hand. When I signed my name, something shifted. Keys clinked softly on the wood. "Welcome home, Miss Sullivan," he said. "Your first distribution wires tomorrow morning." 5 years later, I barely recognized the girl I had been. Beatrice's house had become our headquarters, but the real work happened downtown, in a renovated warehouse that smelled like fresh paint and coffee. We ran group homes, transitional apartments, and outreach programs that never closed early. If a kid showed up at midnight, they got a bed that night. No excuses. Levi Ortiz was the first name on my list. I found him under a bridge, arm broken, reading stolen library books by flashlight. Now he ran operations like he had been born for it. Calm. Steady. Protective. The brother I never had. We were at 79 verified cases. One more stood between us and unlocking everything forever. That was when Martin called. "Your father is downstairs," he said quietly. "Stage 4 lung cancer. No insurance. He wants to see you." I stood at the window watching him lean against the brick wall, coughing into a stained handkerchief. He looked small. Fragile. Nothing like the man who had locked the door. "Let them in," I said. They followed me into the conference room like they weren't sure if they were about to be saved or thrown out again. My father cried before he even sat down. My half-sister stayed standing, eyes wild. I slid 3 folders across the table. Medicaid approvals. Hospice care. Rehab programs. Every resource available to adults. "This is everything we can legally provide," I said. "For minors only as written into the trust." "You're my daughter," my father whispered. I answered. On my 16th birthday. Security escorted them out. I didn't watch them leave. That night, a 15-year-old girl named Destiny texted our crisis number. By midnight, she had a bed and a plan. I wrote her name on the board. 80. At 12:01 a.m., the trust. Unlocked. I didn't celebrate. I stood on the roof and watched the river move, steady and quiet. Some chapters end without fireworks. They just close, and you finally breathe. Winter came early that year. The kind that doesn't just bite through your coat, it digs straight into your bones. Snow blanketed the streets, turning everything into gray and white silence. News trickled in slowly. My father passed away in late January. The hospital social worker called Martin because my old contact info was still listed on some forgotten form. He lasted only 3 days after our confrontation. Medicaid covered only comfort care. Any aggressive treatments would have required cash he didn't have. No flowers, no service. Just a county cremation. I didn't attend. I didn't cry. I just learned and kept moving forward. Cheryl lost the house a few months later. The auction took place on the courthouse steps in Columbus, the same steps I'd once walked past, invisible, at 16. She sat in her rusted Corolla across the street, engine running to keep warm. When the gavel hit, she drove off south on I-71 with whatever fit in the trunk. Motels, cheap hotels, hiding, disappearing. By May, her phone went dark, and that was the last anyone heard of her. Michaela didn't fare much better. She left Talbert House halfway through her 30-day program. Within weeks, she had hit 3 different Kroger stores in Hamilton County in a single weekend, stashing razor blades down her sleeves, sneaking laundry detergent, cold medicine, and other things. Cameras caught every theft. She was arrested with $412 worth of stolen merchandise in a baby stroller. With prior convictions stacked against her, the judge sentenced her to 20 months in the Ohio Reform Women's Facility in Marysville. Her projected release date was late the following year. No one ever tried contacting me again. No letters, no calls, no messages. That line cut on my 16th birthday stayed cut forever. Meanwhile, Beatrice's home expanded. We opened a 12-bed facility in Cleveland's Ohio City neighborhood in February, and another in Dayton's Edgemont section by June. The unrestricted trust allowed us to purchase buildings outright instead of leasing, hire full-time therapists instead of contractors, stock every pantry like it was Thanksgiving every week. By fall, over 300 kids were under our care at any given moment, with satellite offices already under contract in Toledo and Akron. The scale of what we were doing finally felt real. That November, I was named Young Philanthropist of the Year by the Columbus Foundation and the Ohio Philanthropy Association. The ceremony was held at the Ohio Theater downtown. I wore a simple black dress, something understated compared to the tuxedos and gowns around me. The statistics were read aloud: 312 minors permanently housed, 187 high school diplomas earned, 94 trade certifications, 0 returns to homelessness among graduates. The applause was loud, but it felt more for the kids than for me. Levi sat in the front row, grinning like he had just won the lottery himself. When my name was called, I stepped forward and took the glass award. I thanked the board, the donors, Lawrence who had quietly stayed in the wings, and every caseworker and teacher who had stayed late for one of our kids. Then I said the only thing that mattered. This wasn't my award. It belonged to the kids, those who had been told they were nothing, who had faced cold nights and empty stomachs and yet proved the world wrong. I had signed the checks, but they did the work. Later in the lobby, a reporter asked if I felt vindicated. I thought about the empty chair where my father should have sat, about a mother who was gone, about a sister behind bars. I shook my head. No, I said. I feel free. Snow began falling somewhere past Springfield on our drive home. Big soft flakes, covering the highway, quieting everything around us. Levi rode shotgun, silent but content. The past didn't need words tonight. It was buried under 6 inches of fresh white, and it wasn't going anywhere. The gala had taken place in the Duke Energy Convention Center, grand ballroom lit with thousands of tiny lights, like captured stars. I stood there, watching the numbers scroll across the screen, thinking about each individual story behind them. Each statistic represented a life that had been nearly lost, then reclaimed. Levi's eyes shone from the front row, the first suit he'd ever owned draped perfectly across his shoulders. 7 years ago, I had been thrown out with a trash bag and $23. Tonight, I was standing in a room filled with gratitude, achievement, and hope because someone I had never met believed that pain could be turned into power. But there was one more thing to do. Lawrence appeared from the wings carrying a small leather folder. I took it, held it up for cameras, and revealed what it contained. Effective that morning, the Hamilton County Probate Court had approved my petition to legally adopt Levi Ortiz as my son. He said yes. A hush fell over the room. Then a single gasp rippled outward, followed by complete silence. Levi walked up the 3 steps, and I hugged him tight. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing a moment that felt like it belonged only to us. Blood didn't make family. Choice did. I had lost one family that day I was told I was no longer wanted. Tonight, I had gained the family I had chosen, and who had chosen me back. We walked off the stage hand in hand as the orchestra struck up. The lights reflected off the snow outside, sparkling on streets that had once seemed impossible to navigate. Levi opened the passenger door for me, paused, and said, "For the record, I've been calling you Mom in my head for 3 years already." I pulled him close and whispered, "Good. Because I've been thinking of you as my son since the night you let me cry in that stupid private jet bathroom and didn't tell a soul." We drove back across the river, city lights sparkling against the fresh snow. The mansion on the hill glowed warmly, windows bright because the kids insisted on staying up. 40 teenagers in pajamas swarmed us as we walked through the front door, shouting, "Surprise! Welcome home, Mom." Above the grand staircase, a banner read, "Welcome to your forever family." I stood in the chaos, coat still dusted with snow, surrounded by kids who had once had nothing. Levi wrapped his arm around me, and for the first time in my life, I smiled completely unburdened. This was the real inheritance. Not $52 million, but 543 hearts that beat because I refused to break. The night settled over the mansion, heavy with silence after the chaos of the kids' celebration. The snow had muffled the world outside, leaving only the faint hum of the heaters and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I walked through the hallways, passing the photographs of every child we had saved, each frame a memory, a victory, a life reclaimed. I paused at Levi's photo from the very first intake, arm in a cast, eyes wide and scared. Now he was running operations, a leader who had grown from the same hands I once held through winter nights. I went to my office and printed the last verification packet. Case number 80. Destiny Marie Evans, 15, kicked out by her parents the night before. Her laptop sold for drug money, her world crumbling before her eyes. By 11:47, she had permanent housing, a caseworker assigned, and enrollment paperwork filed. I carried the folder to the whiteboard and wrote her name in bold letters beneath the 79 others. Each name was a heartbeat. Now all 80 kids were accounted for. The trust was unlocked, irrevocably mine. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt finished. I took a moment to stand at the window, looking out at the Ohio River, glinting silver under the moonlight. Somewhere down there, 3 people who had once shared my last name were learning what rock bottom really felt like. I didn't hate them anymore. I barely recognized them. They weren't my family. My real family was here, in these rooms, in these halls, in the lives of the children we had chosen to protect and nurture. The winter dragged on, cold and biting. Patrick, my father, passed away quietly at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. No flowers, no mourning from me. Cheryl lost the house at auction, her life unraveling into motels and disappearance. Michaela bounced from one trouble to another, finally ending up in a women's reform facility. None of them ever tried to reach out again, and I didn't expect them to. That door had closed on my 16th birthday, and I had no reason to reopen it. As the months passed, Beatrice's home kept growing. We added more beds, expanded programs, hired more staff, ensured every child had access to real education, therapy, and safety. By the end of that first year, over 300 children were under our care at any given time. Satellite offices were opening in Toledo and Akron. Every child that walked through our doors had a plan within the week. Levi oversaw operations with the precision and care of someone who had once been lost and now knew the value of a home. Then came the recognition. The Columbus Foundation and Ohio Philanthropy Association named me Young Philanthropist of the Year. Standing in the Ohio Theater, lights catching the glass award in my hands, I realized it wasn't about the recognition for me. It never had been. The applause belonged to the kids. To the ones who had slept in cardboard boxes, who had cried themselves to sleep in abandoned apartments, who now were walking into classrooms, apprenticeships, and futures they never thought they'd have. I thought about Levi, the boy under the bridge with a broken arm, now sitting in the front row with his first proper suit. I had gained a son, a partner, a brother in him. We were building more than houses. We were building a family, a future, a legacy. The gala ended, and we left together in silence, the snow soft and fresh against the city streets. Every step felt purposeful, grounded, like the weight of the past had finally lifted. Later that evening, I walked through the mansion with Levi trailing beside me, the children asleep in their rooms, safe and warm for the first time in a long time. I thought about how far we'd come, about how a single choice had reshaped so many lives. That night, the world felt quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. The children who once had nothing now had everything, a home, a plan, hope. And Levi and I, our little chosen family, were at the center of it. We had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into a path that would change hundreds of lives. The past was behind me, locked away in memories and lessons. The future was here, in the warmth of these walls, in the laughter of children, in the quiet resolve that nothing would ever break us again. I walked to the roof and looked out over the city, snow falling like soft confetti over the river. Every light below was a life, a story, a victory. I felt the weight of all those names we had saved, all the challenges we had faced, and I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Not because the past was forgiven, not because the world had been fair, but because I had chosen my family, and they had chosen me back. The mansion, the trust, the legacy, they were all tools. The real inheritance wasn't money. It wasn't power. It was these lives we had touched and saved. It was the knowledge that for every child who had been abandoned, there was now a home, a chance, a family. And that was everything. The snow had settled into a blanket over the city, quieting the streets and softening the edges of reality. Inside the mansion, life moved differently now. The halls were alive with the quiet hum of children asleep, breathing easy for the first time in who knows how long. I walked past each door, listening to the steady rhythm of lives finally on course. This was the life we had fought for, built from scraps and determination. I thought about the journey from that rainy Columbus day, 16 years old, holding a single cupcake in a soaked hand, told I was no longer wanted. That rejection, that cold dismissal, had been the push I needed to fight, to survive, and eventually, to thrive. The trust, the mansion, the fortune, it had all been a means to an end. The real endgame was these children, these lives saved from the same despair I had once known. Levi came up behind me, quietly, hands stuffed into his pockets. He had grown taller than me now, his presence steady, reliable. I didn't need to say anything, he understood. Together, we had built a family not bound by blood, but by choice, by resilience, and by love. We had turned the pain of rejection into a mission, and every single child who walked through our doors became a part of that mission. That night, the mansion felt alive in a way I hadn't expected. Laughter floated from the common rooms. A teenager strummed softly on a guitar, another whispered bedtime stories to a younger sibling. It wasn't perfect, there were still challenges, still battles to fight, still children arriving with fresh wounds. But it was hope. Pure, unshakable hope. Weeks turned into months. Our group homes multiplied, our programs expanded, and our reach spread across the tri-state area. I saw teenagers go from abandoned and hopeless to thriving and capable. Levi became the brother, son, and confidant I never had. We celebrated graduations, apprenticeships, and milestones together. Each success was a quiet triumph, a small victory in a war that had begun long before either of us arrived. Then came the day I stood in front of the Ohio Theater once again, this time not as a young girl who had been thrown out, not as a survivor, but as a mother, a leader, and a changemaker. The gala lights sparkled above, reflecting off the polished floors, each shimmer a testament to the lives transformed. I took the stage, and for a moment, I let myself feel the weight of everything we had accomplished. Over 500 lives changed, hundreds more still to come, and one son who had chosen me just as I had chosen him. I spoke, not about numbers or awards, but about hope, about resilience, about the power of choice. Blood didn't make family. Love, commitment, and shared purpose did. I looked out over the audience, over the children we had saved, over the supporters and caseworkers who had dedicated themselves to the same mission. Every face reminded me why I had never stopped, why I had never given in, and why I had never looked back. After the speeches, cameras, and applause, I returned to the quiet of the mansion. The children were asleep, safe and secure. I went to Levi, still standing in the hallway, tired but smiling. "We did it," I said softly. He nodded, eyes bright. "We did," he replied. And in that simple exchange, I understood fully what it meant to be a family, to be chosen, to be loved. We walked to the roof one last time that night, looking out over the river. The snow shimmered under the moonlight, peaceful and serene. I thought about the past, my father's rejection, the cruelty of a sister, the cold nights alone, but I didn't carry anger anymore. Those memories were lessons, reminders of how far I had come, of the resilience that had carried me through. Levi leaned against me, small but steady, and whispered, "Can we go home now, Mom?" I smiled, completely unburdened for the first time in my life. "Yes, baby. Let's go home." We descended into the mansion, where 40 teenagers in pajamas swarmed us, shouting, laughing, celebrating. The banner above the staircase read, "Welcome to your forever family." Every child who had once had nothing now had a place to belong. I looked down at Levi, and for the first time I felt a completeness I never thought possible. This wasn't the money. This wasn't the mansion. This was the inheritance I had always wanted, a family built by choice, love, and resilience. And the knowledge that together, we had created a home where no one would ever feel unwanted again.